Many of you have heard painted black, devaluation, and villainization. But in what order do they happen and how do they take place? Many of us may be in a relationship right now where we're feeling devalued, but what's next? Some of you may be getting out of a relationship and it seems that everybody in town is asking you questions about the relationship because your significant other or soon-to-be ex-significant other is telling everybody a certain narrative or version of the situation. Let's deep dive into that today. Hey friends, glad to be back today. Let's talk about devaluation. We'll talk about the discard. Let's talk about the villainization, and let's talk about being painted black. And it's very interesting because these are different levels of devaluation. And when the person begins to devalue you, they begin to basically call out all of the problems that they see with you. Now, the interesting thing about the devaluation phase is that the person's telling you who you are, and a lot of times that actually seems like they're projecting because they're saying maybe you're a cheat or you're a liar or you're a narcissist or you're this or you're that. And it's interesting because you might look at that other person and be like, oh, I feel like they're talking about themselves. But it can be very hard because trying to point out projection for a lot of people that don't know they're doing it is almost impossible. But the interesting part about it is that many of you were actually in the love bombing process in the beginning in this relationship. You were put on the pedestal and then one day something changed because that's what we call the switch. When you said something or did something that went against their narrative of you that made them get upset with you because now they find fault in you, that begins the devaluation. Now it's small in the beginning. You know, you're not the perfect person anymore. So there's it's like chinks in the armor, right? This is small, but eventually things get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we actually have a video on the painted black concept, and we're going to put the link here in the description below so you can watch that. And painted black is like over time when you're being painted black, it's basically devaluating, finding fault, finding problems with you until literally it makes the person that's finding problems with you, it almost makes them feel okay about completely discarding you. Because at that point, it's okay to discard you because you're not valuable anyway because you've done all these things. Now, some of the things that you supposedly did could have been completely fabricated. And that's what's interesting for many of you is that I know that some of you are in a relationship where the person is saying that you've done this to them or you've done that to them. And I know that some of it could be true, but some of it could be completely falsified. And I know that some of you say, well, how can somebody completely falsify something that didn't happen? Now, let's get real here, because when somebody is villainizing another person, in their minds, they're going to devalue you, and they might create the narrative that supports them as the victim reality. Remember, if I create the narrative that you're a horrible person and you did X, Y, Z to me, and I believe it, tell my friends, tell any flying monkeys or anybody else that will believe it, and I keep reinforcing it. Maybe I'm telling my friends, maybe I'm telling friends that are no longer your friends about it, and I keep reinforcing it. I'm going to, over time, continue to tell myself so that I solidly believe it. And maybe there's pieces of it that I don't believe, but I'm going to try to keep that reality. And see, that can be hard for somebody that was there, that saw that it didn't happen, or somebody that's being told that they did something bad that they didn't do. And if you're in a situation right now where your spouse or significant other is trying to get you to agree to something that you didn't do, you really got to step back from that. And if you're even thinking about supporting that and lying about something you didn't do, you really have to ask yourself, why would you do that? And what are you wanting to get out of it if you agree to something that you didn't do? Are you trying to make them happy? Or are you trying to get back on the pedestal? Or are you trying to get them to calm down? Or are you trying to have this perfect marriage again? I mean, we really have to think about it. Lots of examples of that. For example, somebody might say that somebody got physical with them when they didn't. Maybe somebody would say that, there's some sexual situation took place that didn't. Maybe they didn't step out of the marriage, but somebody keeps using that narrative that they did. And this is very important because many people get caught up in, well, I want to save my marriage. I'll do whatever I have to save my marriage. But you really have to think about the slippery slope, because if you agree to something that you didn't do, for example, if somebody's saying you stepped out of the marriage and you did not, you agreeing to something you didn't do actually makes it kind of worse because you're allowing that narrative about you to be true. And I want you to really think about the villainization part, because what I found is that when somebody is going through a divorce or a breakup, A lot of times the other person that's creating the narrative pushes the person that's not creating the narrative to get the divorce, because over time there's not, what do you do? Do you sit and wait for the relationship to get better? Or do you finally make a change? And I know that many of you might be in the roommate situation right now, where not only is it a roommate situation, but it's also maybe caustic, and there's some anger and maybe some rage issues at home, and it doesn't seem like you can even have a conversation without having a fight. And so that there's one thing to be roommates, but it's another thing to have a caustic situation. And so if you're in that situation, you agreeing to something that you didn't do is just going to make it even worse. And I know that you might be holding on to your truth right now, and it feels really painful because that person's pushing on you or wanting you to agree to something you didn't do. But again, being true to yourself is very important, because once we start losing our own identity, that's a slippery slope. I want to touch on real quick villainization. So when we're being villainized, and many of you might be experiencing that now as you're going through a divorce or separating from a spouse or significant other, and they're going around town telling everybody things about you that did not take place. And this can be really disheartening, especially when you've been married for a long period of time and you were there for this person that took care of them. It can be really painful that somebody could turn on you and say these types of things. And I feel for you going through this, and this is a very painful place. And I know that some of you want to take the high ground, and I totally respect that. But again, remember, in our society today, a lot of times it's hard to take the high ground, because if you don't say anything, people assume that you did the wrong thing. And I know that that sounds odd too, but if somebody comes up to you and makes a comment, well, I heard from your ex, XYZ, if that's not the case, you probably need to stand up for yourself. And we can talk about that greater in another video. But I know that many of you want to take the high ground, but sometimes we're not always able to take the high ground, and you might want to pick and choose who knows the truth. But definitely get out there to the friends and family that are very important to you, and be sure to tell them what happened, because otherwise the other person might have already spewed their narrative to everybody to try to get everybody on their side. Because remember, when somebody villainizes you, paints you extremely black, they're doing that to discard you and to feel okay about leaving you in this state. They're trying to feel okay with themselves and trying to create them as a victim. This person did all these horrible things to me and all these things wrong, and so they keep pointing the blame to you so they don't have to look at themselves, right? Because personal change for a lot of people is challenging, and they don't want to do it. Personal change and self-help is one of the hardest things that people do, but it's one of the biggest and best things you can do, period, in your entire life. It's like the only reason we're here on this planet is to better ourselves. That's it. But a lot of people refuse to do it. And so if you're in a situation with that, where somebody is victimizing themselves and making you that person that's in charge of their life, you really need to step back and analyze, okay, I see what's really happening. I see that I'm being villainized. I'm being painted black. They're trying to make it okay with what they're doing to me. The things that they might be doing, they might be calling you, harassing you, telling people about you. But again, that's all trying to create that reality for them so that they don't have to feel bad about what they've done, because honestly, I think inside of them, there is a bad feeling that they have about the situation, but they don't want to ever bring that to light. So as long as they make you the villain, they don't have to change. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do. It makes us feel really good about what we're doing and the content we're putting out there, and we really, really appreciate it when we see that somebody has subscribed. So definitely thank you. And as much as I can, I want to reach out to everybody that writes comments as much as I can on YouTube, and have a communication, because I appreciate your comments and feedback. If you like this content and you appreciate this video, please give us a like. And in the comment section, have you dealt with being villainized? Have you dealt with being painted black? This is very important to understand. And if you did, how did you deal with it? Especially, I'd love to hear from anybody in a small town, how you dealt with dealing with that, and how did you combat that with the people coming up to you and asking you questions about, what they were saying, or about the divorce, or what have you. Because I know it can be challenging, but especially if you're in a small environment where everybody knows each other, it can be really painful. Don't forget, even though you might be going through stress and anxiety, don't forget to live your true life.